Hi, my name's Paul Grogan, and in this gaming rules video I'm going to be giving you my quick and dirty review of Spirit Island, designed by Eric Rose and published by Fabled Nexus and Greater Games. Spirit Island is a cooperative game, which takes a different slant on the whole colonisation of an island, because in this game you're not the people who are colonising the island. No, you're playing the role of spirits who must protect the island from the people who are trying to invade. Now, that's one of the first things I like about the game, is that it is a different take on it, and you must work together with the other players in order to try and fight off the invaders. Now, one of the things about this game which I absolutely love is proper cooperative. Now, a lot of cooperative games out there, you're kind of just working together with the other people for a common goal. Now, without going into too many of the rules, I might have a card that says move a couple of pieces from one area to another, and you might have a card that says destroy all pieces in a certain area. So not only are we working together to achieve the goal of the scenario, which is to basically get rid of the invaders, but the cards specifically interact with each other. And the example I've given you sounds very, very simple, but actually when you've got multiple cards that you can play per turn, all of which with different abilities on, and then you've also got, cards that you can play, and if there's a third player in the game, they can play. The way that those cards interact with each other means that the players really have to work together on a very small tactical level in order to try and win the game. So this brings me on to the first negative I have about this game, and it's not really a negative about the game, but let me tell you about the first play experience that we had with this game. I was really, really excited about it. I'd heard so many things about this game, so we sat down to learn how to play the game, and we played 4 of us. And we were learning from the rulebook, and I'll come on to the rulebook later on, but after 3 hours, we stopped playing. We just gave up. We didn't give up because the game was going to win, or we were going to win. We gave up because it was just too hard. And we're people who are used to heavy Euro games. But at 4 players, the amount of stuff going on, and if I just refer back to what I've just mentioned about the way that the cards interact together, when you've got that many people, it was too much. We just couldn't take it. Our brains just were not able to handle it. Now, since then I've played it 2-player a number of times, and I really, really like it. So at 2-player, that for me, I can deal with that, okay? And I'm not a stupid person, and I'm used to complex games. But at 2-player, once you're playing 2 or 3 cards a turn, and you're like, all right, well, I could do this, and then once I've done this, you do that. But then, oh no, I could do this, because you've got lots of choice. You're not just playing the same 2 or 3 cards every turn. You're choosing which cards to play, and in what order, and you're working with the other players. Now, when we increase that to 3 players, all of a sudden, the amount of choices that you have and the amount of things that you have to work out increases exponentially. And then when you go to 4 players, we just couldn't handle it. Now, one of the people, because with 4 players, you use an island that's size 4. So one of my friends was like, look, this is taking too long. We're spending so long thinking about our decisions. Why can't, I'll just stick with this part of the board and you stick with that part of the board, and we'll all just do our own thing. Well, that's not what the game's about, and it wouldn't work like that. The players really need to work properly together in order to try and achieve victory. And as I say, once you increase the number of players, you increase exponentially the amount of choices that you've got and the amount of things that you have going on. So it was a downside of the game for us, and that experience led some people not wanting to ever play the game again. I really wanted to, and now that I've played it 2-player, I love it at 2-player. I would happily try 3-player as long as everybody knew what they were doing, but I would still possibly shy away from a 4-player game. So let's touch on the rulebook. Now the rulebook, it's good and bad. So the structure of the rulebook is a bit all over the place. I mean, I want a rulebook where I can open it up and I can read through it and everything's clear as I'm going. And even in the setup instructions, I got stuck because it said set up the board according to the icons, but there was no explanation of what those icons were. So I was like, I don't really know what to do here. And then it said place some cards on a space that's called this. And the space is not called that. It's called something different. So I struggled a bit right from the start. Those icons are explained in a glossary in the back of the rulebook. And then as I was reading through it, a lot of it just wasn't actually making any sense. And some friends of mine said, oh yeah, with this rulebook, you actually need to start reading in the middle. So I thought, well, that's unusual. But I went to the middle, and the middle contained lots of really good information that I kind of needed to know early on. Now, a complex game, getting the structure right is always a difficult thing to do. But yes, the structure of this rulebook is not particularly great. The rules themselves are pretty clear. I think most things are covered in there. But the one thing that I have to mention, and this occurred in our very first game, or even our second game. So yeah, I had this card here which says push up to 3 settlers or town. And I was like, well, is that push up to 3 settlers or 1 town? Or is it push up to 3 settlers and 3 town, a combination of 3? And we weren't sure. So what I did is I Googled it, and it turns out this game has a living FAQ. On the website, there is a living FAQ of card clarifications, which is searchable. Publishers take note. This is absolutely fantastic, because a game like this with lots and lots of cards, and certainly cards that interact together with each other, you're gonna have situations which are not covered in the base rulebook, or questions such as the one that we had. So yes, a living FAQ for this game. Shout out to whoever from the publishers decided to do that. It's a brilliant idea. Thank you very much for doing it. It was really helpful. Another thing I really like about the game are the core mechanics for the way that the invaders work, and the fact that you see ahead of time what they're going to do, which means you can plan accordingly. So if we look at this turn, you can see that this turn they're going to ravage in the jungle. So you can plan for that ahead of time because you saw it coming. They're going to build in the wetlands, and then this turn they're going to explore in the sandy areas, the desert. And then what will happen is this will go there, that will go there, and that will go there. And basically you can see ahead of time. So, they explored in the desert. Now they're going to build in the desert, and the next turn they're going to ravage in the desert. So you can definitely see ahead of time what they're going to do in the areas. It's just the way that where they're going to explore the new area. That's the unpredictable part. So you can't plan for that, but the rest of it you can definitely plan ahead. Now, in terms of components, the components of this game are actually really nice. The molds for the little figures are really cool. The buildings are good. The pieces are good. The card stock is good. Components-wise, absolutely fine. Now, graphic design, I'm normally fairly critical of graphic design, and this game had a lot of really nice things about it. Now, the icons on the card were a little small sometimes, and a bit hard to see, but once you get used to them, they are clear. And on the player boards, you actually see what the number is underneath the circle printed just below it. This is one of those things that a lot of games now do, but some games don't, and they really should. So yeah, iconography, was fairly clear. Once you understand how it works, they use keywords to describe certain things, and yeah, as I said, once you got used to it, then it's really good, and I found it really clear. Now, replayability. So this game has a number of different ways you can play it. You have the basic game, which is the invaders come into the island and you've got to try and get rid of them. But you have so many different spirits. So there are 4 basic spirits that it suggests you start with. And then there are all of these other spirits as well. And some of these are harder to play than others. And on the back, it gives you like tips of how you play them. And one thing I really love about the game is these spirits and the way that they play is very different. Okay, so some of them are very aggressive, some of them are very defensive, some of them manipulate the fear mechanic. And obviously a game with A and B will be very different from a game with A and D, for example, in just the way that the spirit powers interact together. So there's a lot of replayability in terms of the different spirits you use. The board itself has another side. You can play with what's called a thematic map, and that actually makes it more difficult. But apart from that, there is no way to customize the difficulty setting of the base game, which is normally something that I think, well, hang on a minute, that it really needs to have that. But this game comes with scenarios, which you can play, which give you an extra challenge. And then it comes with the adversaries. And this is where the game opens up, because there are 3 different adversaries. So there are 3 adversaries here. I thought there was more than this, but I may have lost them. But each adversary actually has different levels. So this is where the customization of the difficulty setting comes in. The base game is kind of, I feel it's preparation for actually taking on the adversaries. So you can play at level 1, which is reasonably okay, or you can play right through to level 6. So there's a lot of replayability in this game, certainly with these. I mean, the base game will keep you, occupied for a while. We're just trying out different spirits and different powers. but the adversaries is where you can really step things up to make it more difficult. So have I said yet what I think about the game, whether I like it or not? I don't just like this game, I really, really like this game. And I always say really, really a lot. I don't want to say love, but at the moment I do. There is so much about this game. And so here's my thing about cooperative games, which I've talked about in many forums in a lot of places. Cooperative games for me, there's a lot of them out there, but I have an issue with a lot of cooperative games in that win or lose tends to be more about random events happening at the turn of cards and which cards come out and in what order than actually the skill of the players. Now, I'm not saying the skill of the players has no impact on the game whatsoever, but there are many, many cooperative games where no matter how good the players are, if a bad run of cards comes out, then that's it. You just can't win. Or if you get really, really lucky with a good run of cards, then you will win easily. Spirit Island, for me, feels like it's in the absolute perfect sweet spot. There is a little bit of a random element in the way that the terrain cards can come out and the way that the fear effects work. Okay, they can sometimes help you or, better in one situation than another. But overall, I believe that the skill of the players in this game has more of a direct impact on whether you win or lose than the random element. I mean, I've played some cooperative games that are just 95% random. And that for me is like, well, it was an enjoyable experience to play it, but actually it was so out of my control, it didn't really matter what we did. In this game, I believe it's so much under your control. Now, the problem with obviously a non-random cooperative game is that it becomes a solvable puzzle. So it always has to have a little bit of, things in there just to mix things up a bit in order to stop it being completely predictable. And yeah, I think this game hits the sweet spot. This is one of my very few go-to cooperative games, but it's not for the faint-hearted. Don't let the nice artwork on the front box cover, lead you into thinking that this is a family game. This is not a family game. This is a challenge. And I'm not saying that in a bad way. This is for me, it's a medium to heavy game. Medium in terms of rules complexity, but then when you start having to work out what you need to do and how you put things together and the way that the abilities interact with each other, that's where it takes it to a whole extra level of thinking. And as I like that. And for me, playing this game, it does really feel like a challenge. You go on a kind of, and I'm going to use the word story loosely because there's no narrative driven aspect to this game, but you go into this game where there is areas where the invaders are really, really building up a force. And then there are other areas where you manage to get it under control and you manage to get rid of them. And the game sort of ebbs and flows like that. As the game goes on, and I should have mentioned this earlier on, but as the game goes on, the spirits start off fairly weak, but they get more and more powerful as the game goes on. It's a really, really nice crescendo in that you start off just being able to do a couple of things. And then later on in the game, once you've improved your spirit and you've got these extra powers in your hand, then, that's just great. You're able to do some amazing things. But at the same time, the invaders are slightly getting more powerful as well. And especially if you let them get a foothold in an area, they'll just grow and grow and they become really difficult to take into account, really difficult to handle. So speaking of the way that the spirits grows, that's another thing that I really like about the game. The first time you play the game, well, when you play the game properly, every time you get a new power, you're supposed to draw a power from, you draw 4 powers from the deck of cards and you choose which one to have. Now, when you're first playing the game and you're trying to understand the rules and you're trying to work out how to fit everything together, making that choice is not something that I think first-time players should have to do. And they've already thought of it. So in this game, the first time you play it, and in fact, I've used this a number of times with new people, is rather than having just, draw from the power deck and choose which one you want, it actually gives you a card which tells you, right, the next time you gain a power, this is the one you gain. And that it just makes it easier to play because rather than having to choose one and make another decision where you don't really know what you're doing, it hands you that. And that's a really, really nice way to introduce the game. Once you've played it a couple of times, you don't need to use that. You can then start drawing from the deck. And that just increases the variability massively in the amount of powers that you're going to get during the game. So yes, Spirit Island. That's all I've got to say about it. This is a game which I really want to play a lot more than I do, and I really want to try some more of the adversaries and the extra challenge on that. It would be really nice just to play this game a lot more. So Thank you very much for watching. If you like this review, please consider subscribing to my channel. And if you want to back me on Patreon, then I have a Patreon page, which is how I'm able to do these review videos. So until next time, take care and thanks for watching.